This is TLV1.
The Tel Aviv Review.
Hello and welcome to the Tel Aviv Review. I'm your host, Gilad Halpern.
And I'm Yael Berda.
Every week we bring you conversations with authors about their books and research and other things that we like. And if you like us, please consider becoming a Patreon supporter by going to our homepage. That's tlv1.fm/Tel Aviv Review. Scroll down to the bottom and click the big red button that says Patreon. Click and support us. Some of you have been doing this for months and years, and we cannot thank you enough. This episode is part of a series in partnership with the Israel office of the Konrad Adenauer Foundation that we like to call Israel Behind the Headlines, delving deep into and unpacking issues underlying our lives here in Israel. Our guest today teaches at Tel Aviv University's Moshe Dayan Center for Middle Eastern and African Studies, where he is also the head of the Konrad Adenauer Program for Jewish-Arab Cooperation. He has supervised a new comprehensive study mapping out views and trends among the Arab community in Israel, and its results are being unveiled these very days. Dr. Arik Rudnitzky, hello and welcome back to the Tel Aviv Review.
Hello and good evening to both of you.
So this year is, on the face of it, a watershed year for Arab-Jewish relations in Israel, when the effects of the sectarian violence of 2021 have started to percolate in various ways, most notably the election of the most right-wing government in Israel's history and the appointment of openly racist politicians to key positions, including those with a lot of influence on the Arab community. Now, this state of affair, is it reflected in the views and feelings of Arab citizens as they emerge in the survey?
Allow me to begin with the good news. We are just 5 months after a precedent or historical political precedent when an Arab party actually joined the government coalition. And surprisingly, we found that considerable numbers of Arab citizens actually not only do they support the notion of an Arab party joining the coalition, and not this particular coalition, but assuming that another election cycle or after the next election, a new coalition will be formed. We found out that approximately 64% support the notion of an Arab party joining the government coalition. Of them, almost 50% support the idea that an Arab party should join any coalition, not just a center-left coalition.
Which is unprecedented numbers?
Which is actually, we saw the same numbers a year ago. But it is unprecedented as we examine the trends in the past few years. Now, Israel has gone through 4 or 5 election cycles in a row. And we saw in each cycle a growing support among Arab citizens who actually have the right to vote to the Israeli parliament, which is the Knesset. We saw an increasing percentage of support. The idea of an Arab party should join the coalition. Now, you will ask me, what is the new thing now? Well, the new thing is that we had this experience just 5 months ago.
Until 5 months ago.
Until 5 months ago. We had an acting government for almost a year and a half in which an Arab party, the United Arab List, representing the Islamic movement in Israel, was actually an integral part of the government coalition. And just before the election, we asked the Arab public, how would you evaluate so far the political experience of the United Arab List in the coalition? Back then, in November 22, we found that only 36% of the Arab public supported or said that this was a successful experience. Now, this time, and it is less than half a year after the previous poll, using the same methodology in terms of measuring public attitudes, it is amazing that almost 54%, and this is significant in terms of a statistical method of how you measure public attitudes, almost 54% say in retrospect that this was a successful experience. Meaning that if another election cycle will be in the horizon, in the near horizon, or in the less so, or even in about 4 years from now, we should expect that a considerable number within the potential R voters will actually support an R party joining the coalition with greater numbers even.
So what you're saying is actually the result of this new coalition, which includes the racist parties, the communist parties, has affected the idea that actually there's a necessity for more political power of Arab parties. Am I right?
Paradoxically, we can say that this is true. But I think that this is the way how the public behaves. And actually, I presented the same findings in front of Dr. Mansour Abbas. Now, this gentleman led the United Arab List, and he suffered from fierce criticism within his own community back then, a year ago, when he decided to do this unprecedented political initiative. And I told him, well, it seems that you have been quite successful in retrospect. He told me that, well, he does not pay attention or take the results of public opinion polls too seriously because he is a leader. And in a sense, he was right, because what we see here, that the public or a larger portion of the public actually followed his political path.
Yeah, so he shaped public opinion instead of responding to it.
Indeed.
But the question is whether it will have any repercussions to the broader political participation of Arabs. And I'm thinking about several factors. One is turnout, that is traditionally low among Arab voters in Israel, perhaps because of this feeling of disaffection, right? They have no power. I mean, the concept of an Arab party or having any representation in the government being so slim, so what's the point of voting? And now, if the tables have turned in this way, is there going to be a much bigger turnout? And also within the division of votes within the Arab electorate, I mean, is the United Arab List on the one hand, and the other parties that are not so keen on joining a ruling coalition in Israel, whether it's Hadash or Balad, the more, say, nationalist parties. I don't know what's the right term here. But there has been this division within the Arab electorate, within the Arab representation in the Knesset, between those who are more keen to join, like Mansour Abbas and his party, and the others who are less so. Is there going to be a shifting of power within those? So these two questions, turnout and the division of power within the Arab representation.
I will begin with the last question because it is easy to answer. Actually, this was not presented to the respondents, because we are not in an election time. So you cannot evaluate or measure what would be the potential support or how much each party will eventually get. But what we can tell, that if we compare, and this has to do with the turnout, assuming that election will be held today, tomorrow, in the foreseen future. And here are the news. Now, we found that more than half of the potential or the eligible Arab voters, 50.7%, actually intend to vote. Now, you would say that this is only half of the public, but if we take into consideration what was the situation like just 1 month before the election, back in October, that is about a half year ago, it was less than 40%. Now, this has to do with several factors. I don't want to elaborate too much, but we can say that the potential of actual voting or taking part in the Knesset elections is considerably higher or significantly higher in terms of statistical evaluation, when we compare it to the situation just before the previous elections. So this means that if the election were to be held today, I would not go too far to say that all three Arab parties would gain representation in the Knesset. This means that between 14 to 15 seats for the Arab parties.
So I wanna ask you, shift a little bit the conversation and go back to May 2021 and its effects. And one of the effects that have been spoken about or being researched is kind of a synchronicity that one saw between the Palestinian citizens of Israel, the residents of East Jerusalem, and also Palestinians in the West Bank. And one of the things that you ask about the Oslo process, but you do not ask about the occupation. And I wanted to ask you why.
Well, this is a good question, and I can relate to two reasons why we did not present this time the question. First, based on our experience in the past 5 or 6 years, we sensed that the respondents or the citizens that were surveyed for each public opinion poll were actually emphasizing more the day-to-day problems of the Arab public. Now, if you compare what is more important to the Arab individual who is citizen in the state of Israel, obviously it is the day-to-day problems such as crime and violence, planning and building, political partnership or political representation in the Knesset, even Jewish-Arab cooperation. Only in the 5th or 6th slot comes the large Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the Israeli-Arab conflict. Also, I assume that this question would be quite sensitive. I'm afraid that on such question we would get a relatively high portion of those who reply, I don't know, or I have not crystallized, or I don't have any opinion about that because it is sensitive. Although we carried out this poll through the services of a well-established Arab public opinion firm that is being operating in the Arab sector for almost 40 years. The public opinion was carried out with telephone calls by Arabic speaking pollsters, but controlling all these bias factors, I fear that such a question, which is indeed or still quite a sensitive question, we would not get a significant result in terms of how to measure the public attitude.
So just to follow up on that, that's why I'm asking about May 2021, because that's exactly the change, right? So you see the trend in which, okay, what's important is daily life, what's important is social rights, access to citizenship, all these things. But then this big thing happens in May 2021, and that's when you would expect such a shift. And and thank you so much for the frankness of your answer, because I think that's right. That's the issue. How much can Palestinian citizens of Israel speak and think about the occupation openly? And how much would that change the answers that you're getting also about their other things? So what do you think you're losing by not engaging in that question?
I think that first, today, Arab citizens of Israel are quite open and frank, and they are not afraid to put their opinions straight forward. And also, we should not forget that there are so many other channels to express public opinion, especially social media, So I believe that the fear is also almost disappeared. But when you get to a particular issue of public opinion poll, and we try to present such a sensitive question, that would result in either the respondent would try to satisfy the pollster, and this is by the way, this is a well-known problem among public opinion institute, and I believe also that the director of this institution would not allow me to go on asking such a question. Okay, but I do think that the opinion about the occupation, well, it is quite obvious, and what we since our scope of the poll was quite limited, we wanted to focus as much as we can on really the burning issue. Now, May 21 is a burning issue. Now, May 21 does not necessarily relate to the occupation. We should not be mistaken about that, because the issue with May 21 was, of course, we could think that it has to do, of course, it has to do with a larger Palestinian circle. But when you examine deeply, you see that much is the result of frustration, both on the political level and economic level, and especially in the highly tense scene of mixed cities. Now, take for example, the city of Lod. The mixed city of Lod, it is amazing how the effects of May 21 were reflected later on in the voting ballots. You see in the same city a division between the vote for right-wing parties in considerable numbers, and as a mirror result, you see voting for nationalist parties, national other parties. It is amazing. So it does not necessarily have to do with the larger Palestinian issue.
Yeah, there's always this, you never know whether it's connected or not. And another issue where this connection or not keeps coming up is the protest movement now going on in Israel. I mean, many people on the left and among the Arab community have criticized the leadership of the protest movement as creating an exclusively Jewish space for protest, whether it's not, that the whole issues are only applying and only relevant for Israeli Jews, and indeed very few Arabs have joined the protests, and those who have, there were always controversies in the process, and this is one of the issues that you raise in the survey, and a clear majority of the people polled say that they are in favor of a more proactive participation in the protest movement, that being Arabs. And another thing that is also reflected in quite clear numbers is that the question of law and order and criminality and fighting against criminality, which is also a burning issue right now in the Arab sector. I think we just marked the 100th victim of gang murders since the beginning of the year, which is an incredible surge as opposed to last year. But so the law and order issue is also a burning issue. And also here, the results say that many people believe that the issue will be settled for the better, and it's the government and the police who should be dealing with it. I mean, there's still a lot of faith in the government and its institutions. And all these, to me, are good signs, indeed showing that there's an increasing process of, I wouldn't say assimilation, but sort of an integration into the broader Israeli public, and also a much clearer understanding of the concept of citizenship among the Arab community. Am I right to interpret it this way?
I think that you are right in one way. Because
and wrong in another.
This is always the case, especially when you deal with this complicated issue. We saw that almost 76% justify, in general, the public protest wave. However, when we ask them, well, do you think that the topic, the general topic, meaning the reform in the judicial system in Israel, concerns or the Arab public in particular, we saw that the opinions were divided, approximately half and half. So
a half said that they do apply to the Arab sectors and sector, and a half said that they didn't.
Yes, exactly so. But I think that the real thing is that the nature of the public protest. Now, what we see on television, what we see all the images of thousands of protesters carrying the national flag, actually. Now, what is the message? How can a typical Arab citizen whose identity is more Palestinian than Israeli? Is a mixture between the two, but the minute he sees, or she or he, they see the national Israeli flag, they automatically they cannot fully identify with the message of the protest. Now, we asked the Arab public, well, what do you think? Will you agree that a future constitution based on the Declaration of Independence of the State of Israel will be the basis for a future constitution? Would you accept such a constitution? The reason why we asked this question is that this was one of the slogans that this time we should, among the Jewish public, that this time we should take advantage of the protest and try to formulate or come up with a constitution for the first time since independence. Now, this seems to be somewhat a consensus or something that the Jewish public could agree upon, but much, much less so among the Arabs. We see that approximately 70% is a vast majority that they oppose the idea that the future constitution will be based on the principles or the values of the Declaration of Independence. So actually here we return to 1948. Here we can understand what lies deep in the narrative conflict between Arabs and Jews here, citizens of the same state, by the way.
It's so interesting. And so speaking about the Constitution, I wanted to ask you how you see basic law, the nation state. So that, in 2019, it's passed. So we have about 4 years, which is long enough for people to be aware of the law and its impacts. Do you hear and see that the impact of the nation state law, or is that kind of in people's answers or how they're thinking about their citizenship, or is it something that is still like more outside of their purview?
To be honest, we did not present such a question to the public. But what I can tell from various, I would say, conferences that I took part in, we heard it in the subtext that how come we can identify with the current protests when we, meaning Arab citizens, when we went out to the streets, including, by the way, the Druze who serve in the IDF, in the Israeli military forces, when we came out 4 or 5 years ago protesting against the nation-state law, Where were you, our Jewish fellows? Now, we told you so. Now, the left or the center, you raise your voice and you initiate such a massive wave of protest against a potential reform in the judicial system, and you ask for us. Well, we needed you back then. You did not support us back then. So this is a problem.
Yeah. Another thing that was really interesting to me in the survey was that you asked about identity markers and to what extent they could identify with them. And they were in a descending order, and this descending order, first Arab, then Israeli, then Palestinian, then the religious one, Muslim or other. And I wonder, like, first of all, for the respondents, what's really the difference between Arab and Palestinian for identity purposes? And also, is it really strange that Israeli ranks so high on that list, or is it something that you see as normal?
I'm not surprised by the results. First, the Arab identity is the larger identity. It has to do with culture, heritage, history. The real depth of the history is manifested in the Arab identity. I think this is the largest common denominator. Both you can be a Muslim, a Christian, a Druze, and all of them can identify with the Arab identity. They all share the Arabic language. They were all grown up in the Arab environment. So the Arab identity is the most significant one. Now, we asked them about Israeli citizenship, not Israeli identity. And this was done on purpose. The Israeli citizenship, this is a totally different issue. Now, this is an instrumental identity as opposed to the national identity, which is Palestinian. And also, what we found here is that we found different responses among different age groups. For instance, the elder, where we could see that the Arab, the Israeli, and the Palestinian identities were almost more the same, like 25, 26% for each. Also the religious identity. But among the young generation, we found that the Arab identity and religious or Palestinian identity were the most significant components in the overall identity of the individual.
So they feel less Israeli than the elder ones? Is that how you interpreted it?
They still have to learn how to take advantage of their Israeli citizenship.
Mm-hmm.
And also, we should not forget that this young generation experienced political upheavals that the elder generation experienced in his whole life period. So I think that they still have to come to terms with their Israeli citizenship being as an instrumental identity, how you negotiate with the Jewish majority when you go out to higher education institutions or to the labor market. We found that in the young generation, when you come from your hometown, of course you have your Arab identity and religious affiliation, which is significant, especially when you are a Christian minority or a Druze minority within the Arab public. But when there's a correlation with the age. When you grow up, you become or you start evaluating more and more your Israeli citizenship. Not so your Israeli identity, but your Israeli citizenship as an instrumental identity.
Absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much. I just want to one more question on that matter. So there's been a lot of shifts in the citizenship of Palestinians in Israel, and you speak about negotiation between the minority and the majority. Do you think people understand their citizenship as kind of a jumping point for negotiation, or is it more like a set of fixed rights? How do they perceive Israeli citizenship? Because you just mentioned the instrumentality of it. So is it something that is, or is it something to be negotiated when they think about their citizenship?
To be clear, they do not negotiate their citizenship, and they would certainly not give up on their citizenship. And you know what? We found this thing, ironically, when former President Donald Trump released his deal of the century. And the result was a massive protest. For instance, in the Arab localities in the center part of the country, you know that there was suggestion to annex the central part, what is called the Triangle region, to a future Palestinian state. The election that were held just 2 months after the launch of this deal of the century, the election results in those Arab localities, in these localities we found particularly high turnout. So this is the evidence that they would certainly not give up on their citizenship or negotiate their citizenship. The issue that how do they come to take advantage and use their citizenship in order to mobilize themselves socially, politically. I think this is the question, but they would certainly not give up on it.
Yeah, I actually meant not the issue of giving up or not giving up, but the issue of negotiation of what rights, what does it entail to be a Palestinian with Israeli citizenship? And is it perceived as a fixed set of rights or as something that you need to battle for?
Regretfully, in recent years, they feel that they have to battle for more rights, because what we see, and we just mentioned the nation state law, which gave a big blow to civil rights as far as Arab citizens are concerned. For instance, it has to do with crime and violence. Now, they say that it is our right to have the same police attitude or the police responsibility as much as the Jewish public receive those services by the police. And therefore, this is our right by state laws. We are equal citizens. And paradoxically, we can see that in popular or local protests against the phenomenon of crime and violence, we see Palestinian flags, but civil Israeli slogans, claiming their rights as native inhabitants of this land with Israeli citizenship.
This is really just so interesting.
So interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for these interpretations, because the numbers themselves are also very interesting, and we urge everybody to read, of course, but really hearing from you some of the behind the scenes is really fascinating.
No, it's really fascinating to see, the dynamics of it and the complexity of, Yael is a sociologist, I'm just an interloper, but, the question of citizenship and what it really entails, especially in this very complex reality that we live in, is really fascinating. And you've shed wonderful light on this. So thank you very much, Arik Rudnitzky, for joining us today.
Thank you. My pleasure.
And also many thanks to Itai Shelem, the manager of TLV1 Studios. And now we've got a request, because many or most of you listen to us on the Apple Podcasts app, and we would like to ask you to please consider writing us a review of any kind. Also, you can support us by going to our website and subscribing onto a Patreon campaign. Check out our archive. It has probably close to 1,000 interviews by now. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and most important, join us again next week for another edition of the Tel Aviv Review. And until then, from us here in Tel Aviv, goodbye.
Goodbye.